Hey everyone, it's Tarot Adventures with Jules here. I am hosting this live with Erin Harker from the Magic Makers and the Magic Works, and I am so thrilled. Erin is a wonderful human and has some incredible businesses up and running, businesses plural. She has a brick and mortar shop, well, not brick and mortar, online shop that facilitates all kinds of amazing creations that she has created or that she brings in from other creators. And she also does brand development and web design and all kinds of things. So I'm really, really excited to be here with Erin. I'm just waiting for her to pop in here. Um, let's see if I can. Yeah, she should be on here for just a sec. In just a sec, rather. I'm rambling a bit. Yeah, so Erin's focus for her magic works is on branding strategy and design. Hi, Erin. I'm just going to grab you up here and we can start our chat. Yeah, so hi, Erin.
Hi.
To
Sorry, of
see
course my
you.
dog starts barking as soon as we hop on.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure Pippin will be right in there like a dirty shirt in a few minutes.
Yeah.
How's your weekend going so far?
What?
How's your weekend going so far?
It's good. I'm gonna shut this door real quick. We'll still hear them, but hopefully like a little less.
I'm sure at some point during this chat, Pippin will chime in with his own thoughts and feelings about life, the universe, and everything.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I tried to like shut him out at the beginning and then he started like whining and I was like, okay, okay. You can
Yeah. Yeah. If I close the door, then Pippin whines, and then I have to go open it, and it's this whole thing. He just needs to be where I am at all
Yeah.
times. Although I think right now he's distracted, so fingers
Yeah.
crossed. I was just kind of rambling on a little bit in the first few minutes, but I was telling everyone about your amazing businesses plural, because you have the Magic Makers and then also the Magic Works, and
Right.
both of them are absolutely incredible. I have so much respect and admiration for everything you do.
Yeah.
It's like for again, I can't get my thoughts together today, but I went to you for brand strategy and design, and I'm so grateful for all the incredible work that you put in. I'm in the process of getting all my website stuff
Yeah.
finalized for a launch this weekend, which is exciting. And what you contributed to that is so key to making me feel really good about the work that I'm
Oh,
doing and the
I'm so
aesthetic that I'm putting
sorry.
forward. It's honestly made all the difference. So I thought maybe we could start with that because that's
Yeah.
one of the things that you offer through Magic Works is brand strategy and design. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to know kind of what brought you to that kind of work and what inspired you to get involved with it. And yeah.
Yeah. So the Magic Works is technically part of the Magic Makers because I just have like
Yeah.
one business, but I just kind of branded
Mhm.
separately since,
Yeah, for sure.
people who are shopping for ritual baths might not necessarily be interested in brand and
Yeah.
marketing strategy.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but yeah, my background for the last like gosh, I guess 15 plus years, has been in marketing. I went to college for
Yeah.
communications with a concentration in public relations.
Mhm.
Because when I started college, I wanted to work for magazines.
Mhm.
And then, that's not necessarily like always the most realistic option for everyone.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so I started out in a nonprofit. I've worked for like major corporations and a lot of smaller startups as well. So, and you know, from being a team of one at some places to like the last place I left, I was a team of over 50
Wow.
in the marketing department.
Yeah.
So, really, what I wanted to do was bring everything I had learned and use it to help people who were running like independent businesses, creators. Obviously, I love working with like the spiritual and witchy community on this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Because I think too, like, um, a lot of people who enter business, especially on like the witchy spiritual side, don't always necessarily have a lot of business or marketing background. Um,
Yeah.
and that's like can be a really steep learning curve if you're not familiar with it. And it can make a huge difference in the way like people perceive you and the value that you're providing.
Hmm.
And I just like that's something that one, I also like pretty things. So I
Yeah.
want, if people pour like most people pour so much into their businesses and their creations and what they're sharing and offering. And I think like kind of the skin or the outside should match the amount of effort that's put into that, which
Oh,
is why I think that like branding can be really important. And like you
yeah.
said, it can really give people a sense of confidence and like focus and
Mhm.
intention
Yeah.
with their businesses too, which is why I think like honestly, like starting with your brand, I think can be like a really good first step when you're building a business. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it, but it kind of creates that like central focus and intention for how you want to build and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. What I found working with you is that it brought a lot of cohesion in between the different elements that I was looking at and brought it under one kind of
Mm-hmm.
idea. Like I came to you with a logo idea, but then I ended up going with something that you had created, the monogram logo, because I felt like it so beautifully encapsulated everything that I was trying to do in simplicity, but it kind of, yeah, it brought everything together in a really beautiful way. And it's so nice when you can take, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but my husband a few years ago showed me this video on TED Talks about being a multi-potentialite. And all these lights finally went off, and I was like, oh, that's why I'm interested in 10 billion things at once. So it's so nice when you have that focus on branding and cohesion to bring the various interests that you have under one umbrella, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
because
really
it
helpful.
really
Yeah.
it like goes back to your why. It just kind of like
Yeah.
anchors you in what you're doing. So even when you
Yeah.
do want to do a lot of different things, it kind of
Mhm.
can keep it grounded and connected so that people understand where you're coming from too. Because I
Yeah.
think that is a really key piece of it as well, is that you are creating a sense of alignment between like who you are and what you want to offer with how people perceive you and how you're communicating it so it's clear and they're getting the same
Mhm.
message that you are trying to deliver, like that they're
Yeah.
receiving it in the way that you're delivering it.
Absolutely. And you just do such a beautiful job of that with your website because like just navigating it earlier, I was taking some notes for things to focus on for our talk. Like it's all, kind of loosely structured, but it was so lovely going through because there's such a cohesive blending of the work that you do in web design and consulting and all of that in terms of the design aspect with all of your offerings through the Magic Works too, because in addition to all of these services that you provide, you also have your apothecary and all the components of your shop. But um, it was so beautiful to see you walk your talk in terms of how your own work, I mean, obviously that would be the case, but how it's
Yeah.
structured because everything's so easy to access and easy to use, but it
Oh,
all blends together seamlessly too. So it's really, it's amazing, right? It's like when you go to a hair salon, you want to find someone who has decent hair because then you know that they know what they're doing. Although really it doesn't matter what your hairstylist hair looks like, it matters what their clients look like because they're
right.
the ones doing it to someone else unless they're cutting their own hair, right?
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and I noticed in line with the branding you have a new offering coming up, branding is a spell, and I
Yeah.
wanted to find out more about that and ask you, yeah.
Yeah, so that is something that's still very much a work in progress. I got a little ahead
Yeah.
of myself last year because I get really excited about things and then I'm like, I'm going to do it all. And I don't always recognize how much effort and time it takes to like
Yeah.
do things. Like I have a terrible concept of like how long it will take me to accomplish things, which is
Yeah.
something I work on daily.
Yeah.
So so I got a little excited and preemptively, did a pre-launch last year with that and decided it was something that just needed to hold on for a second. But I'm really glad that it did because it's helped me kind of
Yeah.
get clear on what I want the offering to look like.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of like what we were talking about, I do believe that branding is a spell because you are speaking your intention through your brand, and that's how you are kind of like manifesting things in your business.
Hmm.
Um, and so with that, that is something that I wanted it to be a more accessible option because I know like, I have over 15 years of experience, so my prices are at a certain like price point that not everyone can afford. And I recognize that, and I still want to be able to help people that might be in the DIY phase of their
Yes.
branding, right? Like, because I mean, yes, my background is in branding and marketing and design. So like me creating my brand is different than someone else DIYing. But like I look forward to the day when I can afford to hire someone else to do my brand for me
Yeah.
because, um, you know, when you work with someone else, they ask you a lot of tough questions that bring
Mhm.
things up, and it
Yeah.
helps you get clearer. And you also get like a perspective of someone else seeing what you're doing, the same way like a lot of tarot readers go get tarot readings from other tarot readers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So like I understand like the needs to have like an option to create your brand that's within your budget while you're growing your business. So my idea with this is to offer people kind of like the tools, the know-how, and like the information they need to DIY their brand in a way that allows them to like charge the prices that can help them create a sustainable income and communicate the value of what they're offering to the people who are interacting with their brand, and to kind
Yeah,
of help them, you know, establish that really solid foundation for building their business. So um,
absolutely.
it's going to be like a series of um, kind of like an on-demand do-it-yourself like course
Yeah.
style so that people can do it, because it's, I think one of the things most people don't understand when they dive into branding work is that it is very reminiscent of like shadow work and stuff, because
Oh,
you have to ask yourself a lot of hard questions and
mhm.
really consider a lot of things that maybe you hadn't considered before.
Yeah.
Um, so this will be like a workbook and some videos that walk you through that process. And so you can do it
Oh,
at a pace that
good.
feels comfortable and good to you. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
and,
sounds
you know,
incredible.
yeah, and focusing a lot on the strategy side, but I'll also
Mhm.
be looking at, you know, some basic design tips
Yeah.
and tricks for how you can DIY until you're ready to like pay a professional to do it for you.
Yeah, and that's so incredible. And I love how accessible that is because, as you mentioned, not everyone has the budget to consult with somebody right off the bat. And so it's really helpful to have those tools. And that's something unique to what I've seen offered elsewhere. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that it's kind of go at your own pace because then you can do some journaling and look into things. And when you're ready, take the next step
Yeah,
and move on to the next video. Like, I love that because sometimes I sign up for courses with the best of intentions, but then life gets in the way and things get busy or something else comes up that's especially pertinent. So it's so nice to have something that you can do at your own pace when you have the time available to be able to invest, right? Like that's
right.
amazing.
And like as
Yeah.
I've started holding more workshops, that's something I've learned too. Cause like
Yeah.
even like as someone teaching a workshop, like
Mhm.
I did a 3 hour workshop earlier this year, and I probably
Yeah.
won't do a lot more of those because
Yeah.
one, 3 hours is a huge time commitment. And I think
Mhm.
like I don't always have the longest attention
Yeah.
span. So,
It's a lot of
um,
information too, so to absorb it all, right? 'Cause sometimes
yeah.
like I went to theater school and it was a 2 year program and I ended up going through the summer, so I did it in a year and a half. But I feel like all the information that I learned from that, I mean, again, that's like a 2 year program, so that's
Mhm.
more extensive. But even within a 3 hour context, I think it's the same thing. Like you get so much information, but it takes a while for it to download and absorb and for you to integrate it
100%.
properly. Like I felt like I only finished the program like probably a year and a half after I graduated because it took that long for everything that I had
Yeah.
learned to integrate, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really wise to look at like smaller segments that you can kind
Hmm.
of digest as you go, right? Because sometimes it does take time to integrate that. And like you said with branding, there can be the shadow work aspect of it where it's unpacking a lot of stuff and a lot of fears you may have around, money's a big one for people or whatever else, right? Confidence.
Hmm.
So being able to take that in small, manageable chunks feels really amazing because that
Yeah.
and it's really going to sink in, right? It's like when I teach my kids, it's like I have to be cautious about how much I'm giving them at once because there's
Right.
only so much you can absorb, right? So that's amazing. I love that idea. Oh,
And that's the
cool.
same too, even with like you know, spiritual downloads, or like
Yeah.
whenever I journey or do dream work, I'm always surprised,
Mhm.
or even like reading for other people of like,
Yeah.
you know, days after I've done the reading, I
Yeah.
get hits for people afterwards, which is why I like
Yeah.
to do like deliver like written readings or recorded readings, because it gives me some
Yeah.
time to allow those extra days to see what else comes through. And I
Yeah.
think that's the same when you're working through, you know, like I believe that brands are a constant evolution, just like we're
Yes.
constantly
Yeah.
evolving as humans and people and individuals. So I think that's where like you have your core things that those don't change, but like everything
Mhm.
else around it can like grow and become and transform
Yeah.
like as your business grows and changes too.
Yeah, and I think that's where the branding as a spell is so powerful because once you have that coursework, you can go back and revisit it in a year or
Mhm.
whenever and see,
Yep.
okay, this is where I was at then, this is where I'm at now. What do I need to tweak and change? How has this evolved? Like I think the thing that got in my way, because I've been working on this for ages, is oh my God, I have to have it all done. It needs to be all
Yes.
finished and all perfect. But it's like it's an evolution and you don't have to have
Mhm.
all of the components. Like it can change. And if you try something and it doesn't work, then shift gears and try something else, right?
Yep.
Like having that freedom to be able to explore and having that reference point to be able to go back to is so powerful. I think that's
Yeah,
amazing.
because that's why it's like really helpful too as like a business to, at least on a somewhat regular basis, even if it's just once a year, but to kind of do like a brand
Yeah.
audit for yourself and check
Mhm.
in to be like, is this still in alignment with what I want to be doing and offering and how I want to be
Yeah,
communicating who I
absolutely.
am and who my business is.
Yeah, because that can shift and change over time too. If you decide you want to focus more on one area or you start going with something and you decide that you really like this component of it, but not that so much. So it's like that constant evolution and ebb and flow, right? Which
Yeah.
is really amazing to tune into. Yeah, I feel like those check-ins are really important. Speaking of workshops, you had just hosted the Great Beyond
Yeah.
on I think it was Thursday night, and I attended, and it was so incredible and such a great way to. There's so much chatter going on right now about algorithms and social media and everything else, and it was so refreshing to look at other forms of expanding on your
Mm-hmm.
business. That was so incredibly helpful for me and inspiring and great. Um, and yeah, do you have other websites workshops like that in the works, or are you planning to
Yeah.
kind of re-offer that one, or what's your approach going forward?
Yeah, so the Great Beyond is now available as the replay. So, if any of you weren't able to attend the live and it's something you're interested in exploring ways you can connect
Yeah,
with people and your audience outside of social media, you can go ahead and purchase that on my website now. It's available
yeah.
with the replay and a little workbook with resources that I made, and that's sliding scale, so it's 5, 20, and
Mhm.
$40, so pay what you can. Like the point behind it was more, I get really frustrated when the algorithm talk comes up, because I feel like people are limiting themselves in a way by
Mhm.
obsessing over the algorithm. And
Mhm.
not that you, like, I get it. I get frustrated too when I put
Yeah,
a lot of work into what I'm putting out on Instagram and then there's no one's seeing it and no one's engaging with it, right? I
yeah,
completely understand the frustration,
yeah,
but none of us have control over the algorithm. So
yeah,
it seems like a really pointless thing to like obsess over for me.
yeah. Oh, for
And
sure.
I do think over the last year or two that so many people have been obsessing so hard on how the algorithm
Mhm.
impacts things that we started telling people interact with us in a way that the algorithm's going to like,
Yeah,
instead of like interact with me as a human. Like if
yeah,
you have a question or you like what I
yeah,
posted, like leave me a comment. I want to have
yeah,
conversations with you. Like I
yeah,
don't really care what the algorithm is doing or whether it's going to show it to 100 more people because you saved it instead of
yeah,
commenting or whatever
yeah,
the new trick is.
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and so like that's what I was coming from, a place of wanting to be able to empower people, and also just because in my business, like I shared during the workshop, most of my business doesn't actually come from Instagram. It comes from other strategies I have in place and other tools I'm using, like my
mhm.
email list, and
Yeah,
writing blog posts and things like that.
mhm.
So I think it's really easy because Instagram's a really great, easy way for people to get started in promoting their business. And then we forget that there's other options out there and it's not the only one available to us.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that that's important to look at what other options are available and how to expand
Mhm.
outside of just a social media platform. Like, I think whatever your area of focus is, having all your eggs in one basket doesn't work.
Right.
So having all of these other different options that you can explore is really helpful because as a business, I think it's really important to have a more expansive perspective on, okay, well, how am I going to build my clientele, my following, how am I going to create
Mm-hmm.
community, how am I going to engage with people authentically? Because there can be authentic communication on social media platforms. Like I've met
Absolutely.
so many amazing people, and I would never want to walk away from that because I'm so grateful for it. but I do see the need to expand in other areas as well. And so, yeah, that particular workshop was incredibly helpful. And I noticed that it was still available on your site
Yeah.
as a recording, and that's so amazing. And the workbook that you sent out with it was really helpful as well.
Oh,
So that's
good.
really incredible. Yeah. Um, so then in terms of your other offerings through the Magic Works, you also have social media strategy and design, and then website design via your website spell offering. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that in terms of an offering.
Yeah. So, in addition to like branding is probably my favorite because I think it's where you kind of have to start. But I do also offer website and social media
Yeah.
design and strategy. Which like social media strategy, that's when like we might take a look at how you are using social media. I honestly have been considering moving away from that just because like
Yeah.
I'm such a proponent for, diversifying, and there are already so many people like out here sharing
Yeah.
information about social media strategy and stuff. But if you like want an audit to look at like how all of your social media works together, and kind of
Mhm.
like review and try to set up some goals and ideas for how you can do that, I'm happy to help with that. And then like also creating templates so that you can create like a consistent look, since a lot of these platforms are visual. So like
Yeah.
how you are presenting yourself does matter.
Mhm.
But in that same breath, like just being authentically yourself will always work better on social media. Um, for most
Absolutely.
people, there are certainly like plenty of curated, very highly curated accounts that do very well
Yes.
on the platform
Oh
too.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But I find I'm drawn most, I mean, aesthetics is one thing, but I
Hmm.
keep coming back if I can feel the person's authentic voice coming through or intention. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Pretty pictures are one thing, and I have the utmost respect and admiration for what goes
sure.
into that, right? But yeah, the accounts that I tend to revisit are the ones where I feel that person coming through, and I think that
Hmm.
sense of authenticity and vulnerability often is
Yeah.
really appealing to people because it makes you feel seen,
Hmm.
even through seeing someone else's experience, it helps you
Well,
feel seen in your own, right?
yeah, and that's how we connect, right, with one another,
Yeah.
is by sharing little pieces. And I think that's where, for me anyway, I think it feels better sometimes to do that via other channels, because
Yeah.
when you get vulnerable on places like social media, it's very public. There's a lot of people who
Yeah.
might necessarily be in your circle who can see those things. And I
Yes,
am
exactly.
definitely, like, I think vulnerability is beautiful. I don't think everyone earns our vulnerability.
That's 100% true. No, you're absolutely right.
And
Yeah.
so that is something also, probably as like my Capricorn sun, like I'm very much like, I want
Yeah.
there to be some
Some
boundaries
filter,
there.
some
Yeah.
boundaries. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there is such a thing as oversharing or overdoing it too.
Hmm.
So it's finding that fine line between showing up
Yeah.
as a human being and not kind of keeping some of that for yourself and for
Right.
your people. And yeah, no, 100%. I totally
And
hear you with
ultimately,
that.
it's whatever like you're comfortable with and feels good to you, because
Mhm.
like there are plenty of people who are very much more open than I am, and much more comfortable
Mhm.
being like vulnerable on a larger scale than I'll ever be. And that's
Yeah,
cool, like, right, like it's good that
yeah,
there's
yeah,
different approaches.
yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense though. Like boundaries really are key. Like
Hmm.
that's essential. Um, and I'm intrigued to find out more about your lore session that
Yeah,
you
so
offered.
that's
That's really cool.
yeah, it's kind of like a mentorship session. So
Mm.
basically, like if you wish you had a marketing person on your team,
Yeah,
or in your business you could go to, you can book a lore session with me. And that's
yeah.
basically like an hour for us to talk about whatever project or thing. So,
Mhm.
I've had clients where they worked on their own design project and they wanted someone to like review and help them refine like the design they
Yeah.
came up with. I have a lot of people when they're like wanting to launch like a new project, or
Mhm.
they can even do it as like a little mini branding session, like if you
Yeah.
just want help kind of focusing what your offerings are.
Yeah.
um, I do not I am not a savvy like financial side
Mm.
of business. That's something I'm still very much like learning
Yeah.
and teaching myself.
Yeah.
So like most of my focus with those kind of sessions would be more on like your brand, your marketing, how you want to
Yeah.
frame offerings.
Yeah.
because I think it's really helpful. Like sometimes you just need someone to bounce ideas off of and to kind of like help you review like where are the holes in this thing that I'm doing so that I can make sure I've got all my bases covered. And then after the hour session, like you get a recording, and I also like list out like action steps and suggestions for how you can move forward. So you're walking away with like something that you can really help your business move forward.
That's incredible. And I love that the focus is on marketing and creativity because, I mean, there's people out there that are great financial experts that will talk about all the inner workings of finance and business
Yeah.
structure and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's great that you're focusing on your area of expertise and where you feel most comfortable. I mean, I think when it comes to offerings, that is such a great approach because it's coming from what you know and you understand and you feel comfortable with, and you're helping someone grow from that perspective, and that's really amazing. But that sounds like a really incredible offering. I love it.
Yeah. The
So
point behind that was because like lore is shared wisdom. So that's what like I
yeah,
wanted to share what, I've learned from spending a lot of other people's money, honestly. Like
yeah,
when I was in corporate marketing, I got to test a lot of things out with somebody else's
yeah,
money and learn like
yeah,
what worked and what didn't work. And I kind of
yeah,
want to share like what I
yeah.
learned away with other people who don't have the money to like test it out quite in that
Yeah,
fashion.
yeah, and that's such a great way to incorporate that as part of your business. I love it so much. There's such strength in mentoring and working on a
Mm-hmm.
mentoring basis with someone where you can learn and grow from their expertise that they've gained through years of experience that you may not have, especially if you're new to setting up your business. That can
Right.
be incredibly helpful to get those insights. Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Love it. And then also you have your incredible shop with all of your beautiful offerings. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that too. I've tried your ritual baths and they're absolutely incredible. You also have skincare components and your brand new bath elixir, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The dream steams. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that. Like, how did you evolve that aspect of your business? What inspired you to get involved with that? And anything you want to share about those
Sure.
components? Yeah.
Um, yeah, so originally, like the goal for the Magic Makers has always been that I wanted to open up a shop one day, like
Yeah.
a physical
Yeah.
location. Um, and when I was first kind of starting with the concept, my goal was actually, I didn't even want to create my own products. I just wanted to source from other makers and kind of like elevate
Mhm.
and empower other people who were making really cool,
Yeah.
witchcraft supplies. And I went to lunch with a friend of mine, Megan. She owns the Zen Succulent, which is a garden shop, and she's a
Oh,
very savvy
amazing.
businesswoman.
Yeah.
And so, like, we were kind of like talking through my idea and stuff, and she really pushed me towards making and carrying my own products just because it gives you something that you can always fall back on because it
Yeah.
can, like supplying a shop and stocking enough from other people, like there is a lot of investment that goes into that.
Mhm.
But when you're
Yeah.
creating your own products from scratch, it's a little less of an investment. There's still an
Yeah.
investment there, but just like a little lower. So, and you always
Yeah.
have something that you can stock then. And it also, her other point was that it would also give me a better understanding of what the people who I was stocking would be going through as makers when they're selling
Yeah.
wholesale and stuff, and having a better idea from their perspective, which was all really great advice. And so that's when I decided, because I had already been kind of like playing with like, I made my own ritual baths, but I'd been playing with different blends. And the reason I decided to start with baths is because it's a really easy, accessible way to start kind of exploring witchcraft and
Yeah.
spiritual practices.
Yeah.
Because most people are very familiar with baths,
Yeah.
like maybe not a spiritual bath per se, but most of us have
Yeah.
taken baths in our lifetimes.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And there's something so
um,
special about adding salts and different scents and
yes.
herbal components. And I love that you structure them all around the wheel of the year, essentially, and
Mm-hmm.
all the different Sabbats that comes through. Like
Yeah.
there's so much magic, even if you do nothing else, but you bring out the ritual bath and you have that moment to just sit and be present and
Mm-hmm.
engage with all the energetics of the different components that you're adding. Like that's really, really beautiful to have that as an offering for people to engage with, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes I feel overwhelmed when it comes to like new moon rituals or, full moon rituals or, all the Sabbats, getting all of the components together and doing all the things,
Right.
and sometimes I'm just tired, right? So it's so nice to be able to have something that you can engage with that's there for you and readily available, right? It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also a big thing for me because I think, listen, I love all the pretty pictures that we see on Instagram and TikTok and all these
Yeah.
places, but I mean, my witchcraft practice does not usually look like what a lot of the very grandiose, right? It's so beautiful to like make
Yeah.
those things and create that
Yeah.
magic in that way, but for me, it's a much more I don't know if I want to say like grounded, but it's a much more simple
Yeah.
practice. Like I definitely look for ways to incorporate magic into my everyday and how I can just very easily and without, I don't want to say a lot of effort because there's still intention behind it, but just
Mhm.
how I can like weave it into things that I'm already doing so that it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like you're breaking down like barriers and obstacles to your practice if you can weave it into things that you do
Yeah.
daily and kind of keep it simple. So that's something that I've always really enjoyed too,
Yeah.
introducing
That's
people to that
wonderful.
kind of practice. And
Yeah.
that's what, I mean, that's definitely one of my core. I think a lot of the people who I have as customers or as part of the community and stuff are usually
Mhm.
people who are pretty new to witchcraft,
Yeah.
or they're not necessarily out of the broom closet, or it's not something
Yes.
that their family necessarily like was into, but they're intrigued by it as an option for
Yeah.
their spiritual practice. Um, and so I think that, there's a beauty in the simplicity of like how you can kind of like start weaving it into your daily life. So a lot of my practice and what I share with people is based around the home,
Yeah.
like working with your own surroundings, and that it doesn't have to be something that's so esoteric or out there. Like again, great if that's your thing, and I
Yeah.
certainly weave
Absolutely.
plenty of that. Like I love journeying, I love
Yeah.
working with my dreams, but and that's also kind of like home-based practice in my
Yeah.
opinion as well.
Absolutely. Well, there's something so grounded and um, when you said home centered, like it's very true. Like there's something very grounded in all the products that you create, and there's a lot of care and love that goes into them, and it's very
Mhm.
evident. And like I use your Safe Haven blend for
Yeah.
washing the floor, and I add that every so often when we're doing our floor cleaning. And it's so nice to have these components that are part of maintaining your space and your environment that just add something special to that. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not super complicated, but it just adds that little
Yeah.
ritual spell component to that day-to-day practical exercise, right? And I think there's so
Mhm.
much power in that, and I really appreciate that that's a big part of what you're offering, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you just launched a little while ago, a few months ago, the bath elixirs. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so they are bubble baths that were inspired by the tarot, and
Mhm.
I'll have to give you the handle. It's Aniseed Makes, I believe, is the artist who was gracious enough to help me with the illustrations that are on the labels, and
Oh,
she's really amazing. But yeah, I wanted to do something that was inspired by tarot, and there I actually had like a harder time with these. I'm like, do I want to share this here? But I had a really hard time with these because a big part of my thing is like using natural ingredients. Not that like
yeah,
I'm a only natural, because like I use acids and all sorts of stuff on my
yeah,
face,
yeah,
so I'm not like a only all natural skincare
yeah.
person. But with my products, because I am not a chemist, it is
Mhm.
a lot safer and easier for me to work with natural ingredients. So there was a
Yeah,
certain learning curve with creating the bubble bath. So
yeah,
that's why I ended up going with Bath Elixir, because
yeah,
they are beautifully scented and they create subtle bubbles, but it's not like the movie star bubbles,
yeah,
because in order to get those in your bath, that requires a lot of additional ingredients,
yeah,
which I am exploring and refining my formulas right
yeah.
now. But, and the other thing with that is like with my bath soaks, I
Mhm.
use mostly like herbs and botanicals, and I'm very,
Mhm.
very light on the essential oils in
Yeah,
those. for a couple of reasons. One, if you're heavy on the essential oils and someone has a sensitive skin, it can kind of like trigger some irritation there.
Yeah.
And I wanted more people to be able to use the baths. And then the other thing is that it takes a lot of natural material to create essential oils. And so from a sustainability aspect and from a working with the earth aspect, I think just using the straight herbs
Mhm.
is a lot easier on
Yeah.
things. And so that's like a big piece of it. So, but when you're doing like a liquid, you have to use
Yep.
the essential oils,
Yeah.
which also gets like much more expensive,
Yes, absolutely.
rightfully so, because it's,
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that's something that, so I was
sorry,
involved in, no, no, that's okay. I was just going to say I was involved in health and wellness for a bit, and there was this whole focus on like thou shalt not touch anything that is not 100% essential oils and 100% this, and it's quite frankly exhausting. And I
yeah,
hadn't, when I first read about what is required to extract essential oils, it was maybe 6 months ago, and I had this light bulb go off, and I'm like, this is not sustainable. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? And then you get all of the MLM companies that are just mass producing this stuff, and
yeah.
it's being marketed as being one thing, but it's really something else. And it can, there's, yeah, it's a whole thing.
And
So I
I
really
think
appreciate, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
on the misinformation side of things too,
Yeah.
like, I think again, I love that it's an entry point for a lot of people to exploring how they
Mhm.
can work with herbs, but I think there's a lot of misinformation that goes around about, what these herbs really cure and how to use them.
Yep.
And like, I'm also very interested in like the poison path and working with
Oh,
poison plants, but not in, like I'm obviously not an expert in that. So I'm not going to start using them until I learn more because
yeah.
it can be dangerous.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the same is true with a lot of the like herbal kind of essential oil stuff. And again,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with using them. I think we just
Yeah.
have to educate ourselves a little more than we sometimes do and like
Yeah.
get off of Instagram and also like explore resources outside of the spiritual community
Yes,
because,
absolutely. And just because
well,
something is natural doesn't mean that it's safe as well. Like I
right.
think that that's the thing with both using herbs, because I did an herbal apprenticeship when I lived on Vancouver Island, and it was really great to learn about all the different healing components of herbs and everything else. But so much of it is about the amount that you're using and the ratios and what you're combining it with. And I think everything is kind of enjoy and open your heart and lean into the experience, but also proceed with caution in the same way that
Yeah.
you would with anything, right? Like you're not going to just randomly mix a couple of chemicals in your cupboard, so why would you do that with herbs? And so I love that you're taking this gentle approach to how you're scenting and working with the products that you're creating, because I think that's really important. And as you
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of people with skin sensitivities, and so that makes it more accessible. And
Mhm.
having used some of them, like it's such a lovely experience because it's not overpowering. Sometimes you light
Mhm.
a candle or you walk through IKEA in the candle section and it's just so
I'll get it
overpowering,
right
right?
away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's nice that it's a gentler approach. And I think that it's a gentler approach overall with everything that you're creating. And so it has this very grounded, home-based, nurturing energy to it. It's not beating you over the head with anything, right? Like it's
No.
this kind of gentle building block for moving forward with your practice, moving forward with your rituals, kind of embracing that idea of self-care, right? Which I think is so
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
and
amazing.
and it's too like I'll just make one more point
Yes,
about the whole
absolutely.
kind of like
Yeah.
misinformation thing and everything too. And a lot of this comes from my sister, who she's actually the one who creates all the skincare
Oh,
that we
amazing.
carry.
I
And
was going to ask you about that. That's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
um, but she is also a pelvic floor physical therapist.
Hmm.
So she has, a lot of knowledge and education
Yes.
around these things. And there's this trend currently going on about like labia safe
Oh,
bath
yes.
products and stuff. And like literally, unless something else is already going on down there, which, like happens to
Oh, yeah.
pretty much all of us.
Yep.
But like, unless you are rubbing the bath up in there, it is not the bath that is triggering
Yeah.
that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and so there's a lot of people that are hanging their hat on that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, all mine are labia safe too, I guess, if that's what we're gonna call it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
exactly.
as long as you're not rubbing the salts up in there, like
Yeah.
all of them are probably fine,
But
you
it's
know.
all about ratio too, right? Because then you
Mhm.
take a portion of the salts and you dissolve them in bath water, and it's not going to be as concentrated, and it's going to have the healing components that, both mentally, physically, that allow you to relax and engage in that process. It's anything that you're applying directly can be problematic, but if it's,
Right.
integrated in water, then it's a whole different experience, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many other things besides like what you're applying that can impact
Yes.
that, from like
Oh
what
my
you're eating,
goodness.
medications you're
Yes.
on, like
Yes.
stress levels, like
Yep.
so
It's
much,
a
so
huge
much.
connection between mental and physical health too, and with everything
Mhm.
going on in the world currently and also over the past couple of years. I mean, there's so many things that go into wellness, right? It's not just
Yeah.
one aspect. And so, what I love about these rituals that you're creating between the dreams teams and the ritual baths and the skincare that your sister creates and the bath elixirs, it's like a way to integrate those components of self-care, so you
Mhm.
don't need to go and source out 10 different ingredients to make your own bath salts, because I have made a lot of my own bath salts and I've kind of moved away from that because sourcing the materials can be really challenging, right? Depending on
Yeah.
where you're living and what you have access to, it can be hard to buy 5 different essential oils and then, your magnesium salts and your Epsom salts and some, oats and
Salt and
yeah,
different
coconut,
herbs.
like dried coconut milk,
Yeah.
like all of this stuff, right? Like it's so lovely that these things are crafted so lovingly by you and are ready to go, right? Because
Mhm.
there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And it's
amazing.
also like to a certain extent, because I ran into this problem when I was just making baths for myself before I started my product line, was that I would buy like, a pound of rose petals and a
Yep,
pound of lavender, and then it is very difficult as one person to work through that before they
yes,
kind of lose their scent and their potency
yep,
and their oils.
yep,
So, one day I'd love to grow more of my own herbs,
yeah,
but right now that is a learning experience for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
and I'm not sure that like I'll ever, because it is a full-time job to
absolutely.
garden and essentially farm enough
Yeah.
herbs
And you have
for
to have the space
product.
for it and the climate
Yeah.
conditions, and it depends on what's happening in a given year in terms of,
Mhm.
excess moisture versus drought versus
Right.
like when we lived on Vancouver Island, it was a lot easier for me to source materials for herb crafting because, Harmonic Arts is there and there was a lot of shops that retailed it, so I could go in and get the amount that I needed and know that I could come back the following week, and barring
Mhm.
them being sold out, it was fine. But now I'm in a small town in Nova Scotia where I have access to nothing. It was a bit better in Halifax, but if I'm ordering something and I've got to ship it, then I got to figure out, okay, what can I reasonably use in the time frame that I have before it loses its potency, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like this juggling act, right? And it can be challenging, but when
Yeah.
you're doing it in larger format like that, you're retailing it, then it becomes easier to actually use up all of the things that you have, right?
Yeah. And I mean, to that end, I've even like, I have a time limit on
Ah,
Instagram.
yep,
So I
that's smart.
don't spend too many hours on here.
I,
Um, so it keeps popping up. It's like, you've got 5 minutes left. And I'm like, well,
I'm
can I
good.
cut it out? But oh yeah, I've been actually considering like reselling when I buy like my herbs in bulk in like smaller,
Yeah,
maybe like 1 ounce or 2 ounce things. So if people
yeah,
do want to make their own baths or their own creations, they can do it without having to purchase
yeah.
quite the quantity you do most places.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense, and that's a really cool idea. DIY bath kits would be a lot of fun because
Mm-hmm.
then it's like all the components, but you get to make it yourself. And so that's
Yeah.
part of the ritual, right? Like I love that. That's amazing. So in addition to your amazing apothecary section, you also retail crystals,
Mm-hmm.
um, tarot and oracle decks, um, and I'll touch on some of the other things that you offer after. But so how do you choose? Like, where do you look for your crystals and your tarot and oracle decks? Like, what's the selection process? Because you have a beautifully curated selection of different things on your site. I've always been curious, how do you figure out what you want to incorporate?
Yeah, so crystals I feel like are a little harder. Actually, I don't know if she's still on, but Gnome Corner just joined, and I
Yeah.
actually get a lot of crystals from her that I
Oh,
sell in the
amazing.
shop, which she has an amazing selection too, if
Yeah,
anyone is looking
absolutely.
for crystals. But so I source from her because I know and trust like the
Yeah.
vendors she works with, because she's also
Yeah.
very concerned about like sustainability and
Mm.
ethics. And then I had been working with a distributor out of Canada
Oh,
actually,
cool.
well, who was another one that like did all their due diligence with where they were
Yeah.
sourcing. And recently I just discovered a vendor here in North Carolina out towards Asheville that
Oh,
I'm probably going to start using too,
amazing.
because they actually um, the person who owns it is from, I think, Madagascar.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
So they actually like have a mine there, and they make
Yeah.
sure that they're like, the mine workers are well taken care of and safety
Yeah.
precautions, and
Yeah.
they only go a certain depth
Yeah.
to make sure that it's not, so like there's just, because that is, obviously a really big concern when you're buying and sourcing crystals, is how are
Yeah.
they being sourced? Are they the crystals that they say they are? Because there's a lot
Yeah.
of like, things that can masquerade as different crystals.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are, I definitely look at the processes and the
Mhm.
companies that I source from for that.
Yeah.
And I'll probably
Absolutely.
be doing like a bigger restock of crystals later this spring. I'm still trying to clear out some of my stuff from the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sure.
like it's dwindling. The other thing that I'm starting to do with crystals too is to put together little kits so you can do grids and stuff.
Oh, love
Because
that.
that's another like just fun little way that you can kind
Yeah.
of like bring a little magic into your day and set like some intentions for yourself. So I've kind of started playing with that. Thanks to actually Libra Moonstone is another
Oh,
here, and she kind of,
amazing.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, such a wealth of information.
Mhm.
So if you don't follow her account, definitely check that one out
Oh,
too.
I love her content. It's
Yeah,
fantastic. So
yeah.
great. Yeah.
So she was actually, she was one of my guests on Patreon for the top
Yeah.
tier, and like she kind of like talked about using
Amazing.
crystals and
Yep.
crystal gridding and that kind of stuff. So that kind of like
Yeah.
sent me down a wormhole
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
into that. So I'm putting together some new kits for my shop update next weekend.
Exciting.
And then, oh, my tarot deck. So that a lot of times is
Yeah.
people I've met, like obviously like Rachel with the Wandering
Yes.
Moon, and Kate
Oh,
with
so
Likely
fabulous.
Tale,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yeah.
A couple others that I carried, like Golden Lear Tarot, I discovered through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So like there's just, that's how I've done a lot of them. And then some, I do carry some decks from like US Games, because
Mhm.
what's nice about them is I don't have like a minimum order.
Yes.
So like I can order just a couple decks to see if people are interested, and because I'm a very like small scale
Yeah.
business at this point, as far as like what my turnover is like, that kind of enables me to have like a bigger selection. And I do think it's kind of like the difference between like self-publishing and having a publisher with books
Yeah.
too. There are benefits
Yeah.
to both, and there are reasons to go either direction. So I
Yeah.
kind of like to keep a mixture of both and support artists and who, chose different paths, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a range of different price points too, which makes it more
Mhm.
accessible to more people, which is
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
that's really great. Yeah, I
yeah.
really
So that's,
appreciate that you have such a range of different decks because
yeah.
it
And it's
does.
always
Yeah.
stuff that I like. Like
Yes.
that's what most
Yeah.
of the decks I carry, I use too.
Yes, absolutely. I love taking that approach because I feel like if it's something that you like and work with, then there's a certain energetic around that. And if
Yeah.
it's people that you know, like the tarot creators that I've gotten to know in the community, every time I pick up one of their decks, it's extra special to me because I have that
Mhm.
personal relationship with that individual and creator, and it adds an extra level of,
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word is, appreciation, I guess.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
really lovely to have that and to be able to support people's work that you respect and admire. Like that's
Yeah.
huge, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, incredible. You also have a gorgeous ritual section on your site that I was just fawning over earlier with your altar flowers and your bundles. And I know you shared a reel yesterday or the day before where you were unpacking all of these beautiful glass vases and containers. Tell me a little bit about that process. Like, how do you choose? They were all beautiful, and like what goes in all of them, and how do you, yeah, what's the process like with all of that?
Yeah. So the any of the altar flowers
Hmm.
or the like burn wands that I carry, those are
Yeah.
actually created by Lee Moore Crawford, who is local here in Durham. You
Oh,
can find her
amazing.
at Radiant Bee Flora. She just launched a new thing.
Oh, cool.
But she like it's all bee friendly, locally sourced flowers from North
I
Carolina,
love
the
that.
Triangle area. So she works with
Yeah.
either stuff she grows in her garden
Mhm.
or it's stuff from like local flower farmers, which obviously, you know, more sustainable, less culturally appropriative.
Yeah. Yes, that's a
So
big component because there's so much of that, and yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
that's like, I'm always, you know, obviously that's a pretty big conversation that's been happening for some time in the spiritual community. But when
yeah,
you're interacting with people who aren't as familiar with like the practices and witchcraft and things,
yeah,
I'm always surprised by how many people aren't actually, they are completely unaware of these things. And because what's been mass marketed is, you know, like the sage bundles and
yes,
all of that kind
absolutely.
of stuff, that it's just, you know, there's a lot of education that I do that is, you know, like
Yeah,
I didn't necessarily expect.
yeah,
And I take a very gentle approach with it because we don't know what we don't know, right? Like
yeah,
most people don't want to be
exactly.
assholes. It's just that no
Yeah,
one taken the time to explain to them.
yeah,
But so yeah, so that she's the one who creates all of those gorgeous offerings, and she's practically a
yeah.
real life fairy. She started offering like
Oh,
monthly workshops too. She's
oh,
very
that's incredible.
ethereal and flower.
Yeah,
So if you're into that, definitely check out
oh,
Flora.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, so that's all. And her stuff, like she usually like harvests on the Sabbats. And so there's a lot of specific intentions behind what she puts into the bundles and the altar flowers as well, which is, you know, just beautiful for your practice.
yeah, amazing.
So yeah, so all of that stuff comes from her. And then that was kind of like, as I was carrying the altar flowers, I was like, I should start getting vases so that you can put your altar flowers in a vase. And the vendor that I get my candles from, that I started carrying around the holidays because I love
Yeah,
candle magic and working
yes.
with
Oh my
fire.
goodness.
Uh,
Yeah.
not to sound like a pyromaniac, but I do love to play with fire.
No, there's so much
Um,
magic in it though, and it's fire is
yeah.
so transformational. And like I've started lighting. I've got a friend in BC who does bath products, and she just launched some handmade incense that she makes that is absolutely incredible. And I've started lighting candles or incense every time I pull cards, and it's such a simple ritual,
Mm-hmm.
but it really makes it for me. It sets the space, it sets my intention, and it really has, in some ways, transformed my practice. It's such a small thing, but it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, and that was something too for me where like I have started, you know, I have like a very small ancestor altar in my bedroom
Yeah,
with like pictures of people who have passed over, and I like to, a lot of mornings I just light a candle
yeah,
and you know we'll have some coffee with them,
yeah,
you know, just even if it's for like a few minutes to like check in,
yeah,
but I'll leave the candle burning a lot of times while I'm working.
yeah.
um, and so it just became part of my practice, and that's
Mhm.
really like, you know, my goal has always been to kind of inspire and empower people to explore their own practice and what feels good to them, and I want to supply them with tools um, that have good intentions behind them, and that are, you know,
Yeah.
sourced in a way that feels good. So all the candles I carry are like hand dipped here in the United
Mhm.
States, so it's local as well.
Oh,
um,
incredible.
and I've started the ones that I unpacked on the reel the other day. So
Yeah.
excited about those because they're 6-inch skinny tapers. So they're a really nice spell
Ooh.
candle, where I
Yeah.
also will do like the 8 or 10 inch like
Yeah.
standard instead of just like the little spell candles. Like if I'm trying to do like a bigger working or I'm asking for something bigger,
Yeah.
that's like a
Yeah.
little more time. So I carry like different sizes based on like how you want to kind of like practice or what your spell
Yeah.
is for that candle.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I got those little ones, and I'm really excited. I'll probably order those in some more colors because I just think it's such like a great size for a spell candle.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just one sec. Pippin's whining
Yep,
at the
yep,
door
yep.
and Joyce is coming. I'm gonna go grab him. Yeah, he's
Oh,
just wants to be in on the action. That's amazing. And I love that you have that candle element that you've included along with the dried flowers. And they're so aesthetically beautiful, but knowing where they come from too, like that's such an amazing company and how incredible that you're able to both craft your own things, but also incorporate things that are made by local creators or not so local creators, but just people you know within the community. Like that's such a beautiful way to incorporate all of these different elements together.
yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I
And
love
I'm
that.
working with another local artist, to do tarot cloths and altar cloths. She makes the most gorgeous bandanas that are like, she uses all natural dyes and makes her own block prints and stuff. But like she uses like onions,
Wonderful. Oh
and
my God, I love that.
so very, you know, sustainable and earth-based. And like I
Yeah.
discovered her actually through my hairstylist.
Oh my gosh, that's
She
amazing.
shared her because she goes to get her hair cut from her as well. And so we've been talking and emailing. So I'm probably not this shop update, but the next one I'll be
Yeah.
sharing some of her stuff.
Oh,
Um,
that's so
that's
exciting.
Yeah, her handle is Neon Tumbleweed.
Ooh,
But it's like super cool
incredible.
stuff, and I'm so excited because like I've been on the hunt for something that could be like a tarot cloth or altar cloth, because I
Yeah,
just kind of don't love a lot of what's out there because it's
yeah,
just not my personal style.
yeah.
So I was really excited when I
Oh,
like saw
amazing.
her stuff, and I was like, wait a second. And then I saw she did like all the natural dye stuff, and I was like, oh, I hope she does wholesale. So I'm really
Oh,
excited
that's
to some of those.
incredible. Oh,
Mhm.
that's so exciting. Yeah. Finding something like that that really resonates with what you feel personally drawn to is so incredible. And then that's going to be a beautiful component to add with all of your other offerings. I love that so much. I'm so excited to see what she comes up with. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And I love it too when like, because this is how I started like with wanting to do this,
Yeah,
was like finding other people who were making magic and like bringing
yeah,
them into like a shop where more people could kind of find them. So
yeah.
every time like I find a new person where I'm like, yes, I get to
That's
add
so
stuff.
exciting. Yeah, something new to add to your offering. That's
Mhm.
gorgeous. I love it. Um, So now I want to ask you, you have these incredible seasonal spell books that you do, and I cannot wait for the spring one. Um, because we were doing RV travel for a while, I ended up digitizing a lot of my books, and I now have accumulated quite a bit in terms of tarot and astrology,
Yeah.
but um, I still do try to focus on digital a lot, and I love that you offer digital format and you also do printed copies of
Mhm.
everything, which is so lovely because then if you want a coffee table reference book or something to
Yeah.
come back to, that's so lovely. So tell me a little bit about your process for creating them. And yeah, I just love to know more because it's such a beautiful
Yeah.
creation.
So that is, you know, like I said, like at the beginning, like I originally, like one of my dreams was to work in magazines,
Yeah,
and I wanted to create something that wasn't really like a magazine. Because like I don't think these are really magazines, but they're like a
mm,
quarterly kind of publication, and it also includes
yeah,
like pages for you to write your own
mhm,
observations and stuff. Because again, like I'm just very much the kind of person that I think a lot of our magic and a lot of learning witchcraft is the process
yes,
of like
absolutely.
learning and researching and observing and kind of like seeing how things work for you, because much like
Yeah,
everything, like it's a little different for everybody.
yeah,
And so that was kind of the intent, and again it ties into excuse me, the seasonality that I
yeah,
try to weave into like everything that I offer is, you know, working
yeah,
with the season around you, and kind of like what's going on in the world. So that's kind of how it started. And like I said, a lot of the people that I, you know, have a tendency to work with and my customers are
yeah,
often like new to witchcraft, which was like another reason that I was like, I think this will be really helpful for people.
yeah.
Um, and I started it in the fall,
Mm,
was the first edition that I did. So now we're up to the spring edition, and I'm super excited about this one because we're talking about all sorts of fun stuff like flower magic, and I've got a garden planner in
oh,
there
I love that.
kind of like learn more about like gardening as kind of like a witchcraft kind of practice, as I've been like
I love
working
it.
myself. I
Yeah.
bought a lot of seeds last year that I never planted, so we're
Mhm.
working on it this year. If you hear anything in the background, my sister's actually outside working in the garden
Oh
to
my
clear out
God,
one of the
that's
beds right
amazing.
now.
Oh, I love that.
So
So
yeah, so
great.
there's going to be that, and then the other thing that I'm talking a lot about, because I have I have been like at the beginning of the year, I kind of took a break from alcohol. I took like most of
Yeah,
January off from drinking just to kind of like reset because the
yeah,
holidays were stressful and a lot of times I'll lean on alcohol a little bit
yeah,
during stressful times.
yeah,
So I just took like a little breather, which I
yeah,
do kind of like every once in a while. I'll just be like, let me make sure I'm in
yeah,
check with my relationship.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So so I started exploring like more, and this is obviously like a big trend that's going on right now is like, herbal cocktails, like
Yeah,
where you're working with different herbs and stuff. And so
yeah.
I've got a whole piece in there that I am very excited about like how you
Um,
kind of like create cocktails that are
yeah,
more herb based instead of alcohol based. And of
yeah,
course, like there will be an option, a suggested
yeah,
option to add alcohol if you want to.
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
that's incredible. Well, I've been sober now for me up on 10 years in May,
oh,
and
wow.
it's I've got a
Congrats.
lot of alcoholism in my family, and after my son was born, I just didn't seem I didn't have an acute issue with it at the time. I mean, I'd been pregnant or nursing for quite a few years before that anyway, but my mom's a recovering alcoholic and I've got a lot of alcoholism in my family, and I was looking at my kids and I'm like, it's up to them to make their own choices and they're free to do whatever they want, but because there is a genetic component to it,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to have open communication about this and also show them that there's alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, like they're totally free to make whatever choices they want, and I totally
Mm-hmm.
love and accept that. But yeah, it's been an interesting process in replacing, I mean, it's been a while now, but replacing that Friday evening glass of wine to unwind at the end of the week, right? And
Yeah.
to look at like what kinds of things can I bring in instead of that. And so it's been quite a process. And I love that there's this move towards herbal concoctions and mocktails. And so you can still have the power of ritual and enjoy the process. And yeah, it's
And also it's just I am really excited that this is more talked about and accepted just because like
yeah.
there are, it used to be that like if you weren't drinking, it's like, why aren't you drinking? And I think
Oh,
we're moving
huge, huge.
still
Yeah,
is it.
and that's been the hardest part of it actually, is the social side of it. Like I'm not in touch with really either side of my family anymore, but when I still was, it was a real thing and it made me realize how much alcohol consumption was part of our family culture. And it's just so interesting. I went into it as this is just something that you do, right? I
Yeah.
didn't really even think about it. And so it's really interesting. Yeah, I think that there's definitely a shift in how we look at that now and what options are available and everything else. And I think that's really great, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And even like my previous career, like the industry I
mhm,
was in was very
yeah,
much like, networking and going out
yeah,
drinking for happy hours. And that was a huge
yeah,
part of that work culture as
yeah,
well. It's
absolutely.
just, and I definitely have had like moments in my life where I did not have a handle on my relationship with alcohol.
Yep. Yeah,
Definitely
second
had
year
these,
university, I'm looking at you. I'm surprised
yeah,
I have a year left. Like,
like, hey, I'm still here. I
yeah,
survived. That's a feat in itself. Um, but so like it's just, as I've gotten older, and calmed down a little bit, I just
yeah,
like a lot of times I check in with myself, like, why do you want to have this drink right now?
mhm,
Like, is it really just because, like if I'm going out with friends and like we're just, going to have some fun, or
yeah,
I want to celebrate something, like I want it to be good reasons. Like I don't want
yeah,
to be drowning or numbing,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
and
And I mean, I didn't really drink coffee until the pandemic hit, really. Like I was always more of a tea person, and then I found that my morning coffee ritual has kept me sane. Honestly, my
yeah.
tarot ritual, my coffee ritual, but I do have to check in with that every so often and make sure that it's not getting too excessive or I'm not leaning on it too much, right? Because it's just like
Right.
swapping one thing for another, right? So it's so interesting. I think that process of constantly checking in and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, for me, the ritual of making it is just as important as the actual beverage itself, whether it's a matcha or whether it's coffee or a cup of tea or whatever it is that I'm making, right? So I think it's really wise to do that check-in process, right? And to
Yep.
look at, and that's what I say to my kids, like, you do you, like, you pick what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my one request, if I can even go so far as to make a request, because it's 100% down to you, is just be intentional about it. Like, ask yourself, like,
Right.
why is it that I'm doing this? what is this adding to my experience, and is this making it better or making it worse, right? And then if you can go through that process continually, then you know that what you're doing is with intention rather than just something that you've fallen into because that's what's done, right?
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think too, like in that same regard, like I intermittently will do new moon tales, which started out as like a cocktail that you could make for the new
Yeah.
moon. And one time I did like a tea, you know, it suggested like tea blend or something. And
Yeah.
I had a couple people who reached out to me and like
Yeah.
thanked me because I was offering something that wasn't alcohol based as
Yeah.
part of the ritual. And I was like, oh shit. Like I didn't even think
Yeah.
about like how
Yeah.
exclusionary it can be if like all you focus on is like alcohol
Yeah.
cocktails. And I've just had more people who have entered my life recently who don't
Mhm.
drink
Yeah.
for, you know, a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and it just kind of like opened my eyes up, and I thought, hey, I want to do something. Like I don't feel like there's a ton being done for the people who really
Yeah.
want to focus on this. Obviously it's becoming more of a trend, which was another reason why I wanted to look at it, but
Yeah.
offer just like different ways that you can, you know, like if you are looking for something just to like calm down and relax at the end of a long day, that like there are other
Mhm.
options besides alcohol out there to do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think I really clued into what was available until I was pregnant because, of course, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
drinking.
Yeah.
And there's this amazing, if you ever make it to St. John's, Newfoundland, there's this incredible restaurant there called Raymond's, and they do set course menus. And so, in lieu of gifts, my husband and I, for our birthdays, because they're both in June, and our wedding anniversary, which is in December, we go for a really nice set course menu. And we've been plant-based now for, it'll be 12 years in May. And May is a big banner month for both of those things for me for whatever reason. Um, but they actually would put together a fully plant-based tasting menu for us. And then when I was pregnant, they put together a tea pairing. And it
Oh,
really,
I love
because I was pregnant and it really, with my son, and it really opened up my perspectives on, oh, there's so much available and there's so
it.
many
Yeah.
things that you can do. And I always loved the idea of pairing the food that I was eating with a special beverage. And I thought it had to be wine or whatever else. And it was so
Yeah.
nice to see that you can do other things. And like tea isn't just an after dinner drink. Like you can pair it with different things and do ice and add it to sparkling water. And like there's all these different
Yeah.
things that you can do that make the experience of it really special, right? And it's so great that there's more of that. And I'm so excited that you're creating that. And I was excited about this, the spring spell book anyway, but now I'm like, I cannot wait. So when does it launch?
It launches this Friday. I am getting everything finished up over the
Yay!
next couple days, and then it'll go to print. And so the print copies, I usually I do pre-orders. So pre-orders closed right now for the spring edition, but I will order like some extra print copies too, because I was honestly like, I wanted to offer a print copy, like print version eventually.
Yeah,
But then I had so many people reach out with the first one that I launched, like, oh, can I order it? Is there a printed copy? And I was like, let me see if I
yeah,
can make this happen. And I did for the first one, like without planning to. I was
yeah.
like, okay, now there's print copies. So I have been shocked that I actually sell a lot more of the print versions than I do
Oh,
of
yes.
the digital versions, which is not what I never expected that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the digital version will be available with the next shop update on
Oh,
Friday. And then
wonderful.
the print copies will mail out. You can order that Friday and then they'll mail out that following week when they arrive.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to read it.
And
That's
there'll be like a spring
amazing.
cleaning to, like I'm
Ooh,
talking about, like spiritual cleansing your
yeah.
home spring. And then
Oh,
if anyone
love
on here is in the southern hemisphere and celebrating fall,
that.
the fall edition is also still
Oh,
available digitally, so you can get a hold of
yeah.
it too. And they're timeless. Like I don't talk
Yeah.
about anything in the spell books that's specific to like this year
Yeah.
specifically, so you can really use them for
Yeah.
years.
I appreciate that so much because if you have the print version, then it's something that you can bring back every year
Mhm.
and visit and look at, okay, well, what are some of the rituals that I want to come back to this year? Because there's
Yeah.
something so powerful about being able to come back to something. Like if you find a
Mhm.
recipe that you really like or a ritual that you really like I like trying new things. I love trying new things, but I'm also very much a creature of habit. It's that big split Gemini. So it's like I want both. But it's so nice to have that ability to
Yeah.
be able to come back and revisit something, right? It's
Mhm.
great to know what's happening specifically to this year, but what can I come back to and practice again when this time of
Yeah.
year rolls around? Like there's such intentionality with working with the seasons like that. It's really
Hmm.
beautiful. I tend to struggle with winter and,
Yeah.
a bit seasonal affective. And so spring just feels like such a rebirth to me. And it just,
Yes.
so I cannot wait. Even the fact that we have more sun now, like it's a beautiful sunny day today, and I'm just soaking it in. Like it's so lovely to have more light, and it's cold today, but it's gonna get warmer, like
Yeah.
focusing on all of that. Yeah. Speaking of spring cleaning and home-based stuff, you also have a hearth and home section of your site that has
Mhm.
all of your like your safe haven blend for cleaning and
Yeah.
a variety of different things. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So like I talked a little bit about earlier, like home-based practice is pretty much like at the core of the Magic Makers
Yeah.
and like what I offer. So I wanted to start offering some like products specifically for your home too, which to be honest, like you could really use any of the bath salts in the
Yeah.
same kind of way, if you wanted those intentions instead. Like, but the home cleansers, like I originally designed them as like a floor sweep because that wasn't something I was seeing a lot of out there, and I've always had hardwood floors, like pretty much everywhere I've lived. So, and I also, I don't know if anyone else does this, but like sweeping is like a very kind of like therapeutic practice for me. And also like I find myself
I've been quiet.
when I get really like stressed or
Yeah.
imbalanced and kind of like, off kilter, or if I'm
Yeah.
really like angry or hyped up about something, I just naturally will grab a broom and start like sweeping
Yeah.
things, like kind of like ground what's going on and like get it out of the house, like that
Yeah.
energy. So I
There's so
think
much
there's like a
magic in that.
beautiful kind of like energetic practice that can happen with cleaning.
Yeah.
I kind of hate cleaning, quite honestly. So like if I put a spiritual element into it, it's a little bit more appealing to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I'm a stress cleaner. When I feel really anxious, I
yeah.
clean. And sometimes it happens like at 3 a.m. because I'm just gonna let him out. There's somebody dropped
Yeah.
off a parcel unexpectedly and he just
We
loses
just,
his head.
that's what was
Oh,
going on here as well.
go, here. Yeah, no, anytime we have a package delivered or anyone comes anywhere near the house, we always know because he just loses his head. And actually, our
Me.
cat sits in the window and growls at anyone who comes too close to the house, too. So we have two very, like, territorial and protective
I
animals.
love that
It's
the cat does it as
something
well.
else. I know. She, like, sits in the window and you can always tell when someone's going by. She's like, "Arr, arr." I've never seen that before. I've had so many cats and none of them have been quite so protective. It's quite something.
Yeah,
No, but
I
I
don't
love
know
that
if you
process.
heard my
Yeah,
dogs that sounded like they were, fighting
yeah,
each other. But that was because someone just delivered a package at our house as well.
of course, of course. It's amazing that like protective instinct, like
Yeah.
it's really, and Pippin's all of like 8 pounds. So I don't think there's much he could really do outside of volume, maybe scare someone off
Yeah.
from his like dulcet, not so dulcet tones. I love what you said about sweeping though, and like clearing out space because I feel like that process of sweeping quite literally clears everything out. Like, I always think of practical
Yeah.
magic and that whole like sweeping the dust out after the major ritual, like there's so much power in that, even in the visual and physical manifestation of that movement,
The
like it
actual,
literally
right.
moves space. Yeah, like our space after winter is feeling really stagnant and we're long overdue for like a really deep clean, and I cannot wait to engage in that spring cleaning
Yeah.
process because I feel like it just lightens everything up. And
It
it's
does, and it's just such a nice way, like with the fresh energy that comes in with
Mhm.
spring, to kind of like
Yeah,
mirror that in your environment and kind of create
yes,
that same like inviting that fresh energy in by clearing out,
absolutely.
anything that's stagnant needs to kind of
Yes,
get moving.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love that so much. So, oh, wow, we've been talking for an hour and 13 minutes. Um, Time flies when you're having fun. So there were just two more things that I wanted to touch base on before you go. You also offer tarot readings and workshops. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so tarot is something I've worked with. I think I got my first deck when I was like maybe 12 or 13. My mom got it for me in Virginia Beach at a
Oh,
place called Heritage House. We used to go to
that's,
Virginia Beach a lot as kids.
oh yeah.
actually we went because she was getting past life regression readings done
Oh
there.
my gosh,
Like,
that's amazing.
yeah. So, witchcraft and acceptance of the spiritual kind of aspects of things. It's, been with me since childhood. And my mom used to read our tarot cards a lot, like on Sundays. That was, she would read it, do readings for me and my sister. Uh,
Oh,
so that was just like a big part of kind of like, just like memories from my childhood. So like I have a very long standing relationship with tarot, but I only started professionally offering readings, I guess almost 2 years ago now. I think I started like the summer after I launched, because I wasn't going to do it at first. I don't know, when I first, because tarot was such a personal practice to me, like I wasn't really comfortable reading for other people. And I think it was kind of one of those things where I was still learning how to accept the gifts that I had,
yeah,
because I had a couple really hard years in my 20s, loss of family members, and just like I just was not necessarily in a good place.
yeah,
But my sixth senses, my gift of sight, happened to get really heightened during that time, but I was like kind of in a weakened state
yeah,
because of everything I was dealing with on an emotional level. And so I hadn't learned how to like establish healthy boundaries with the spiritual world yet. And
yeah,
because
yeah.
I was so receptive to things, it opened up a lot of things that I didn't necessarily want to invite into my space. Nothing like super negative. It was just like there were no boundaries, so they would just show up at any time and hang out for longer periods of time, which might sound crazy to people
No,
who
not
have
at all.
had those experiences. But so I kind of like in my 20s, like turned my back on my spirituality and like my
Yeah,
gifts and stuff, and was like, I don't want this anymore, and like turned them off. So
yeah,
I think it's taken me a while to kind of learn to develop
yeah.
that relationship and strengthen it again, and kind of let it back in. So, but I had a reading, and the person was like, they want you to put it up on your site like this weekend.
Oh,
Like after you get
that's
done
so
with this reading, you put it up on your site that you offer readings. And as soon as I did, I started getting people booking readings with me like
nice.
immediately.
It's
Um,
funny how sometimes you need that outside validation or push to like
mm-hmm.
seek permission. Like it's like you
Yeah.
know in yourself that this is right, but like I don't know about you, but I'll like second guess it and be like, oh, but you know this, or
Yes.
oh, but I'm not ready, or like what if this, what if that? But it's
Yeah.
so lovely. I find even with the practice of tarot, so often if there's something that I've been avoiding, it'll come through in the cards
Yeah.
because it's laid out physically in front of me. I have to pay attention to it. I'm not like I could avoid it, but really like it takes that tangible representation outside of what's going on in my brain and
Yeah.
my heart for me to actually pay attention. So I love that you had that message exactly when you needed it. That's really
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Oh,
Um, and another big part of that too, and this is something that like I've kind of learned to accept over the last couple of years, is that,
mhm.
questioning your gifts and like questioning it and like, is this real? And that kind of thing is also like a huge part of the process. Like it's normal.
Yes,
Part
absolutely.
of accepting your gifts is
Yeah.
learning how to trust and having those questions about what's
Mhm.
going on and what's coming through too. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it's also like important to learn how to establish those boundaries and protect yourself, because when you do
Yeah.
start, I don't think, and sometimes I can be really cavalier about this too, and I have been during workshops before,
Yeah.
because like I do feel that we are all protected, and that like,
Mhm.
your intentions and things matter, but there is like an element of protecting yourself and safety
Yeah.
measures that you take with like clearing your energy and closing off
Yeah.
the connection when you're done,
Yeah.
that are really
Absolutely.
important, that I'm not sure like as tarot readers we talk about as much, and that's more for people who are, right, because again like tarot is just a tool, so you can use it a lot
Yeah.
of different ways. I love Pip Cards
Yes.
Tarot,
Yeah.
because she uses it more as like a creative tool, and I attended her magician
Yeah.
workshop and it was amazing. So if
Ah,
you're a
amazing.
creative and you like to write, like I'd highly recommend any of her workshops. It was such a lovely way to spend my Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Um, but so yeah, so there are different ways, but if you are using it to divine and connect with the
Yeah.
other side, which is how I use it a lot,
Yeah.
it is important just to kind of like protect yourself and recognize that you are exchanging and opening yourself up to certain things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Again, boundaries, right? Like
Hmm.
boundaries is something that
Yeah.
I didn't even realize were really possible for me until about 11 and a half years ago. I had a big upheaval in my personal life, and it really, yeah, I learned a lot through that process, and it was very humbling. But the big takeaway for that for me was boundaries and the importance of that. You know, whether you read because you're opening yourself up in that way, or you're reading even from the perspective of sharing your energy and space with another person, it's so important to establish those
Mm.
boundaries for yourself, you know, because all of it is a leap of faith and trust. And so
Yeah.
you have to have those protective components in place in order to, yeah, to create that sense of protection and that container for that
Yeah.
experience as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah.
been leaning a lot more into like channeling. I mean, partially because I'm not sure I really had a choice in this.
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
things just come through and it's not like I'm
Yeah.
like, oh please give this to me. Like it just
Yeah.
pops in.
Yeah.
And so that's why like I love doing the unveiled readings and like the unveiled
Yeah.
workshop, which has to do with like journeying and connecting with the spirit world.
Yeah.
Which I'll be offering those again next month
Oh,
since
fantastic.
Bieltana is coming up, which a lot of people don't talk about as much, but like it's very similar to Samhain that
Yeah.
like the veil is very thin at
Yeah.
that time, which you
Absolutely.
can connect with the other side anytime, but
Yeah.
you know, there's usually a little more activity going on around
Yeah.
those 2 times a year.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, 'cause I've taken a look at that workshop multiple times, and I love that you're facilitating that process, right? Because for someone who's new to this, it can be really helpful to talk to someone who has some experience and can take you on that kind of guided exploration with that
Yeah.
process. Right?
And I
That's
really liked the collective one we did in, I don't know if it was either the end of October or beginning of November. I did the last workshop. And I'm
nice.
excited to kind of like refresh it,
Yeah,
after like, you always learn a bit after you do
yeah,
like a workshop and things that you want to change and do a little differently. But it was like a really beautiful experience because we took a collective journey and like everyone sharing their experience and what, how they connected with, their
yeah,
guides and what it was like for them. I really enjoyed that part because
yeah,
I love seeing people kind of like wake up to their magic or
yeah.
recognize that like it doesn't have to be this, outside person,
Mhm.
connecting you. You can connect to it yourself and you kind of carry it within you. So like helping
Yeah.
people kind of bring that to the surface is
Oh, that's incredible.
something I'm pretty
Yeah.
passionate about.
I have my South node in Pisces, and I tend to really resist that energy a lot. And like it's taken a lot for me to get rid of my inner control freak and,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know, embrace what's coming in intuitively and actually trust that it's
Yes.
real and valid and not just a figment of my imagination, you know, and that whole aspect of like losing control and leaning into that because there
Mm-hmm.
is a faith component in that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
huge. It's a big part of a process. So having someone be able to hold that space and guide that process is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're anything like me.
Yeah.
um, so
My
the last, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say my South Node is in Capricorn, so that's like
Yes.
I like to rest back into this,
Yeah,
but and I want to know all the things. Like I want to know the
yeah,
answers. I want things to be concrete,
yeah,
but that's not really
yeah,
how it always works.
yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on before I let you go is your Patreon offerings, because
mhm.
you have an incredible Patreon account and offer so many amazing things through that. So I know that you're restructuring a little bit, and I
Mhm.
think you're looking at relaunching soon. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask about that. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm really excited. So I started on Patreon, as most people do, because that
yeah,
was like the most well known.
yeah,
And funny enough, like I found at the beginning of the year, I was like going through some of my old books. I write down a lot of like ideas and notes. I have all these journals
yeah,
everywhere. So I was looking through, and like before I even started the Magic Makers, like the
mhm,
year before, I had
yeah,
this whole outline of like a Patreon community I wanted
yeah,
to
yeah,
start and everything. So it's definitely been like something that I've been pretty passionate about, like creating community
mhm,
around this.
yeah,
Again, because like as much as I do mostly solitary work when it comes to my
mhm,
witchcraft practice, there is such a comforting and supportive element that like even if you are doing your practice solitary and you don't want to share it on social media, sometimes it's nice to
Yeah.
just be able to discuss your experiences and like kind of get that like affirmation from other people,
Yeah.
and that like yes, you're not crazy.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
so that was always kind of like the intention behind having the community, was for people to be able to share and connect. And I
Yeah.
found after like, you know, there were a lot of learning things that happened with managing a community, you know,
Yeah.
again, like I was talking about earlier, recognizing how much time it actually takes to accomplish things.
Yeah.
But um, one of the things that Patreon doesn't have is like really the ability for the people in the community to like share and connect with one another unless I'm the one
Yeah.
starting it. And like, I never wanted to be this all knowing being
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
like leading you all,
Yeah.
you know, there for support when you need it, but not necessarily like the only one who's sharing
Yeah.
information, because I don't think that's how like strong communities really work.
Yeah.
Um, and so like again, not knocking Patreon, it is great if you're looking to just get started because it's like a
Yeah.
low financial commitment up front. You don't have
Yeah.
to like, you know, there's no money out of pocket unless you start making money.
Hmm.
So it's a really beautiful way to start. But there were just like, I noticed there were a lot of things, and as I talked to people in the community, and a lot of them were looking for that connection as well as like the
Yeah.
content I was sharing. So I'm really excited to relaunch April 1st on a
Oh,
new platform,
yeah.
that's going to allow people to have like their own profile. There'll be like a membership directory, so you can find, you know, like if you're really into figuring out how you can build a witch's garden and you want to talk to people who are into gardening, you'll be able to find, you know,
Yeah.
like find each other and connect with each other.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm really excited about doing, and I'm just now starting to kind of like reach out to people, is doing a series of workshops where we have guests from the spiritual community and come and teach
Oh,
what their
amazing.
expertise is, because that again
Yeah.
lends itself to that like empowering and elevating other
Yeah.
magic makers in the community,
Incredible.
and connecting people who are interested in different things and just kind of bringing more voices into the conversation.
I love that
So
so much.
yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a really nice, um, like a little different than what's available out there. Like I belong to like
Yeah.
some other like online communities in the spiritual space
Yeah.
that I love, like holisticism is an
Yep.
amazing
It's a
free one
great
that I was
one.
typing up the other night.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Um,
fantastic.
so there are definitely like a lot of great ones out there. And then
Mhm.
I just think like with mine, it's probably a little bit more for, I mean, certainly people who identify as witches as well,
Yeah.
but I wanted it to be a little bit more open to people who maybe
Yeah.
are just like, you know, they're not trying to make this their whole life, but they like this kind of like
Yeah.
freedom of spirituality that kind of comes with it. That's like a little, you know, and also like grounding it. Like I've said the entire time we've been together, like I'm a big fan of kind of like grounding our spiritual practices into this earthly plane that we're on,
Yes.
because
Yes, absolutely.
that's the experience we all signed up for, you know?
Oh, I love it. Well, I'll be looking out for that April 1st. That's so
So,
exciting. Oh my goodness.
oh,
Uh,
and one of the things I'm doing a little
yeah.
differently this time, instead of having like tiered access,
Hmm.
there will be tiered prices, but you get
Hmm.
access to everything
Oh,
regardless
I
of
love
how
that.
much you pay.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just kind of like on the honor system. If you can afford more, toss more into the
Yeah.
pot. But I wanted it to be a little more friendly, and still also that makes it a little easier on me because I don't have to worry
Yes.
about like who gets what. It's just like everybody gets
Yep.
everything. Like
Yes.
come.
I love that structure because not everyone has the resources to be able to pay certain
Yeah.
price points. And that's one thing that I've been struggling with because I want to create a community platform as well, but I've resisted Patreon because I know it is inaccessible for people in a lot of ways. And so I think having something where, yeah, it's the honor system and you can pay what you can. And I think that
Mhm.
there's a lot of power in that. And then having
Yeah.
everything be accessible to everyone regardless, I think that feels really good to me. Like that feels like
Yeah.
a really kind of balanced approach. So I love that you're doing that. That's amazing.
And there will be a minimum contribution just
Yeah,
because I do think there is something to be said. You know, one, I
yeah,
have a lot of big dreams for how this community will
yes,
grow over time. And eventually I'd like to look at recognizing additional forms of capital besides just
Yeah.
financial, because you can contribute whether you have money or not to a community.
Absolutely.
Like that's not,
Yeah.
that's a very capitalistic notion.
Yes.
So
Yes.
figuring out ways that we can do that, but that's like a much bigger undertaking than I can get
Yes.
done by April
Yeah.
1st. But I do think it's important to have a certain, like we were talking about boundaries,
Yep.
because as a safety measure for people who are in the community,
Yep.
that it's not just like a free for all,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of sharing spirituality and spiritual practices requires a certain amount of like trust in the
Yes.
people who you are
Absolutely.
surrounded by, and knowing that what you're sharing is safe
Yep.
in the community.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yep.
why, there will still be like an investment in order to get in, kind of as like
Yes.
safety precaution for
Absolutely.
people.
Well, yeah, and it is an investment of energy as well, and
Mhm.
it's creating that structure and that space and that holding
Yeah.
platform for everyone who's participating, right? So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And I'd
amazing.
also like to, my hope is to be able to pay the people who do workshops who come in as guests.
Oh,
And
incredible.
so I
Yeah.
want to use some of the finances that we
Yeah.
raise to kind of give back to the people who are sharing their time with us too.
And that's so amazing too, because then there's the idea of exchange, like
Mm-hmm.
interaction and engagement that goes both ways, right? Like
Right.
I love the energetics around that as well. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an absolute pleasure having you here. I really appreciate that we had a chance to do this live and chat
Yeah.
and find out even more about all of your incredible offerings with design and also, brand strategy and then what you're creating for your website. Like that's truly incredible.
Yeah.
And I
So
really
excited.
appreciate it. So thank you. And I'm really excited about that spring spell book and also your new social platform and all of your offerings. And yeah, so thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me. I had a blast. This was so much
Oh,
fun.
so fun. Yes. And thanks for allowing me to go over the hour.
And Divinely In Tuned, even though we're wrapping up, if you have questions and you want to like shoot me a message, I'm happy to answer any questions too.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I'll be sharing this to Instagram, my Instagram TV and feed as well.
Cool.
So if you have missed part of the chat or weren't able to tune in, then that will be available afterwards. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jules.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your
You
weekend.
too. All right. Bye.